Backrooms is one of those films that evoke not so much a genuine emotional response as an eerie feeling of déjà vu. Watching it, I had the absolute conviction that I had somehow already seen all of it, that there was nothing essentially new in it. And while it's true that this film obviously draws heavily on the horror genre with all its cliches and methods, I felt like this déjà vu I experienced was a lot deeper and goes way back into the history of culture. In this video, I'll try to trace those works of cinema, literature, and art that I find fundamentally similar to the aesthetics and messages of Kane Parsons Backrooms. I'll start with Giovanni Battista Piranesi and his series of etchings Imaginary Prisons. These works present a vision of an entangled world with numerous staircases, doors, bridges, and very few people who are barely able to navigate these enormous structures. The more you look at these structures, the less sense you can make of them. Their purpose is always very unclear. The bridges come to an abrupt end, the stairs don't seem to lead anywhere, the doors appear too huge for the tiny people that inhabit these places. And there is always very little light in these paintings. The sun can barely get through the endless arches and vaults. The character of a Piranesi painting is someone completely lost and unable to find an exit from this kind of convoluted hellscape, which is a feeling very close to what Kane Parsons evokes in his movie. Another important point of reference is the genre of the Gothic novel, the classical attribute of which is the haunted house or castle, which the naive and innocent protagonist usually stumbles into without realizing it's haunted, a trope that would later be used and overused in the horror genre, and actually to the point of absurdity, where the main character doesn't have the slightest doubt about going into a place that looks like this. The Gothic novel pretty much invented this kind of space, which produces nothing but claustrophobia in the main character. And claustrophobia is an important part of the Gothic novel. The feeling of being stuck in a limited space is probably its biggest feature. But with these novels, just as with Backrooms, you're not actually afraid of the place itself. You're afraid of whatever inhabits it and lurks in its shadows. And naturally, that thing that inhabits it is nothing like you've seen before, and that's because the Gothic castle is a place from another world with its own special fauna and laws of physics. All of this is very much the case with Backrooms, except the endless hallways of the castle are replaced by endless office corridors, and the ghosts are replaced by figments of your own distorted memory, to which I'll return in a bit. The Gothic novel was also an important influence on a movement that I find very similar to the aesthetics of Backrooms. It's the movement of Expressionism. Here's a classic definition of what Expressionists aim to achieve. They depart from a realistic depictions of life in the world by incorporating in their art visionary and powerfully emotional states of mind that are expressed and transmitted by means of distorted representations of the outer world. Two things are important here. First is the renouncing of realistic approaches to art. Expressionism doesn't try to represent reality as we perceive it with our senses, but seeks to transform it. Secondly, the depiction of the outer world in Expressionist works is heavily distorted by the state of mind of the characters and the author. The boundary that separates the perceiving subject and the perceived objects becomes very blurry as the objects become imbued with the emotional states of the subject. For instance, in works like these, the outside world is extremely distorted, reflecting the inner pain of their main characters. Abrams writes that the Expressionist works represent the experience of an individual standing alone and afraid in an industrial, technological, and urban society which is disintegrating into chaos. All of this is as relevant for the aesthetics of Backrooms. The uncanny feeling it creates arises from the disintegration of a typical workplace interior turned into a labyrinth with no human beings inside. Backrooms disintegrate, and this is going to be a spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, you might want to come back later. Backrooms disintegrate because, as we find out near the end of the movie, they are a projection of our own degraded memory. The Backrooms monster looks like a pirate because it's a projection of Clark's memory of him dressed as a pirate, or it becomes especially apparent in this shot where we see how Mary's childhood memory of her house gradually turns into an unsettling Backrooms interior. In Backrooms, there is no place for objective reality. Instead, this place is an externalization of the character's mind, a metaphor for their existential dread rooted in the events of their lives. Just like with Expressionist cinema, the background of the shot becomes the primary object of interest, because the background is a reflection of the character's inner feelings. The background in films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is so twisted because the characters' minds are so twisted and deranged. Similarly, the backrooms are so eerie precisely because of their straight lines and right angles, which mirror our 21st century fears of infinitely long structures with no exit. Speaking of which, one other expressionist author whose work very much resonates with backrooms aesthetics is Franz Kafka. For him, spatial structures and buildings played a huge role in creating a sense of anxiety. His novel The Trial, for instance, often depicts labyrinthine passageways the main character must navigate to find the reason why he had been convicted. In one of the episodes, he thinks, in addition to this staircase, he could see in the courtyard 3 other separate flights of stairs, and besides these, a little passage at the other end which seemed to lead into a second courtyard. Of course, it is implied that the second courtyard would also have 3 flights of stairs and another passage into another courtyard, and so on to infinity. For Kafka, reaching your destination is a completely futile and impossible task, because the destination recedes from you at all costs, and the space itself distorts in order not to allow you to reach your goal. That's why Umberto Eco wrote that in Kafka's story we must accept that we're moving in a non-Euclidean world, mobile and elastic, as if we were living on an immense piece of chewed chewing gum. Backrooms shows us a very similar situation, where escaping the backrooms is pretty much not an option. You're meant to stay there, preferably forever. It's impossible to escape Labyrinth also reminds me of some other Kafkaesque pieces, from Escher with his paradoxical and recursive paintings, to Borges and his Library of Babel with its impossibility of finding ultimate meaning. Or if we have a look at the 90s cinema and TV, Cube by Vincenzo Natali or Twin Peaks by David Lynch also seem to have that eerie and claustrophobic feeling that is present in Backrooms. Another artist who strikes me as quite similar to Backrooms vibes is Edward Hopper. Take his painting Sun in an Empty Room. You can immediately see that there's something wrong with it, but it's hard to tell what. Maybe it's the emptiness, the feeling that there's nothing in a place that should have something. We expect this room to be filled with objects reminding us of human presence, but there are none. It's just an empty room. Compare it with the original Backrooms photo. Doesn't it work in a fundamentally similar way? The empty rooms and the somewhat artificial greenish color of the wallpaper make it all feel very strange. They make you wonder why this place appears completely empty. Or let's have a look at another Hopper's painting, his famous Nighthawks. It captures a very similar feeling of being lost and lonely, but also note how masterfully it plays with angles. The triangular counter looks more like a prison for keeping the worker inside, and the gradually narrowing corner on the right leaves very little chance that there is an exit from inside it. In the same way, the whole diner doesn't even seem to have an entrance, it has only a door that leads somewhere inside the building, leaving even less hope for the characters. These paintings create a very similar feeling of urban alienation as the one created by Backrooms, where color and geometry play a crucial role. One more element that makes Backrooms special is its connection to the aesthetics of workplace dystopias. The Backrooms are not just any kind of empty building. Instead, they pretty much resemble office buildings with their square panel lights and monotonous coloring. In that respect, Backrooms reminds me so much of films like Terry Gilliam's Brazil with its absurdly endless corridors filled with tiny rooms for the employees, or Jacques Tati's Playtime with its no less absurd number of cubicles. Backrooms transforms this kind of aesthetic into something way more unsettling. The spaces that are supposed to be full of people and activity are now completely devoid of anything except for random furniture being scattered around. Lastly, Backrooms plays a lot with another kind of medium, computer games. Naturally, it has a lot in common with horror games like Amnesia or Outlast, but I also think the similarity is a bit deeper. Remember, for instance, the cut-off objects that Clark finds in Backrooms, which look very much like objects falling through textures in video games. Another example is the very entrance to the Backrooms, which is basically a texture that allows you to pass through because it has no collision detection. When I saw it in the movie, it looked kind of funny, But now I realize that it's trying to hint at something deeper. If our reality can contain computed textures, which may at times contain bugs and through which people can fall, then maybe our whole reality is a huge computer simulation. This is really quite a nice touch to the whole aesthetics of Backrooms. Not only does it make you afraid of a parallel reality where you can find yourself and get completely lost, but it also makes you doubt the basis of your reality that allows for the other one to exist. What if we are all living in a matrix and a place like Backrooms is the actual real thing that we only get to know in our scariest nightmares?